Factor Uncensored. A man in Louisiana will have a permanent reminder of the punishment for raping a 14-year-old girl. Not only will Glenn Sullivan Sr. be headed to prison for the next 50 years, a judge has ordered that his balls be removed. My next guest demanded Sullivan be physically castrated. And joining us tonight on The Factor Uncensored, we have Livingston Parish Assistant District Attorney Brad Cascio.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode. Hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and share the video. Hit the join button and become a member. Why? Well, members get exclusive content. Hit the bell icon on my channel so that you will receive a notification every time that I drop a video, and you can go and check the video out. As you can see, this story is about a man who was sentenced to castration for the SA, the assault, the rape of a 14-year-old girl who eventually turned him in. He got her pregnant, and DNA tests show that he was and is the father of this 14-year-old girl's child. And he's 54 years old. He was sentenced to 50 years in prison as well as castration. I didn't even know that they can sentence you to castration. I'm just now finding this out. Watching this stuff, I didn't know. Come to find out, this happened in Louisiana. Come to find out, they can sentence you to chemical castration or physical castration. This guy was sentenced to physical castration. But do you agree with this? It sounds a little inhumane. They're going to explain the difference between a chemical castration and a physical castration. And again, he had been assaulting this little girl, it seems like, for some time. He knew her, lived with her, whatever. And she finally turned him in. You have to listen to the story. And I'm sure a lot of you guys would probably agree with the castration. I didn't know that they can legally sentence you to castration, but they can, and they did with this guy. Crazy.
Glad to have you here on The Factor, Mr. Cascio. Crazy situation there. A man is accused and has been convicted of raping a 14-year-old, and he was sentenced to 50 years in prison. And now part of that sentence is physical castration. Many of us have heard of chemical, but when you talk about physical, exactly what does that mean?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Of course, we're talking physical this time, as you said, unlike the chemical. I've had probably 2 or 3, I think, over the course of my career, chemical castrations that are ordered. And what that entails in the state of Louisiana is a scheduled administration of shots throughout the remainder of the defendant's life that he has to go in, he has to report, and he has to voluntarily intake. And if he ever were to take testosterone or steroids to counteract those injections, then that would be a new charge and he would go back to prison. For the case of physical castration, we're talking about a surgeon surgically removing the defendant's testicles from his body.
Got it.
Jeez.
So now the person in question, the man convicted, is 54-year-old Glenn Sullivan Sr. How did we get here? Give us a little backstory to tell us why this was necessary.
Look.
So Glenn Sullivan has lived in Livingston Parish, by my understanding, his whole life. And I can tell you he is what we call a long-time offender or a career defendant. He has constantly been a part in the justice system as a defendant. And this particular crime that he's committed is just so egregious and so heinous. The raping of a 14-year-old girl, which led to her being pregnant. Now this girl is raising this child. I mean, she has to live with this the rest of her life. With this child that I'm sure she's, gonna love and she's gonna raise. And, I really commend her. She was able to actually finish school, get her high school diploma, and she's really making something of herself, and I'm proud of her for that. And Mr. Sullivan, just being the lifelong defendant that he is, committing such a horrible act to this young girl, I think he deserves every bit of this.
And it's my understanding from court records that he also threatened to kill her and her family if she told someone that he had raped her.
That's correct. That's usually a part of this type of offense, right? These guys want to exert some type of control over their victims to protect themselves. So they will often use threats of violence or harm to either the victim or the victim's loved ones and close relatives to keep that secret and to protect themselves.
14-year-old girl.
It's my understanding from speaking with the victim and her family that Mr. Sullivan does have a history of physical abuse. And so not only was it a threat, but it was a real threat. It was something that he was likely to follow up with. And so that definitely instills some fear in this victim. And like I said, I'm very proud of her because at some point she said, enough's enough. I'm tired of this. And she came forward. And for somebody at such a young age in such a dangerous position to have the courage to come forward and see this all the way through, I felt obligated to bring her as much justice and as much vindication as possible.
And how old is she now? And is she still living in Livingston Parish?
Well, I don't want to give up too much about the victim, honestly, because I don't want to do anything.
But we do know she's an adult now.
Yes.
Yes. Got it.
She is safe, and she is, she's living her life.
Excellent. And when the sentence of 50 years in prison and then the castration, physical castration, is that something that you requested, something that he requested? What?
So under the Louisiana law that's currently on the books, on the conviction of certain offenses, the court can order chemical castration. But there's a subsection that says, with the defendant's written consent, in lieu of chemical castration, we can order physical castration.
With his consent.
And speaking with the defense lawyers, they were going back and forth with me over what type of sentence we were looking at, and the idea of a 50-year sentence came up. And I considered it, and I've said the only way I'm agreeing to 50 years is if he agrees to, instead of chemical castration, we do physical castration in this case. And so the defendant actually, after speaking with his lawyer, being advised of all of his rights, signed a written motion and order for the physical castration and agreed to it.
Now, was that a tough decision on your part, or you said, this guy's a monster, let's move forward with physical castration so he won't harm anyone else when he gets out, if he gets out?
Yeah, the odds of him getting out are next to none, but you just never know. When laws change, DOC calculates time differently. He may one day get out. And when I thought about this in this particular case, given the act that was committed and the strength of the evidence, I had no problem at all whatsoever requesting this sentence. I mean, we have a DNA test that proves the child born from this young girl is his child. So there's absolutely no doubt what occurred. You know, our burden is beyond a reasonable doubt.
Weirdo.
And in my nearly 11 years as an assistant district attorney, I have never prosecuted a case that I didn't really believe in. Because if I don't believe it, I'm not going to prosecute it. But in this case, you had no choice but to believe the man was guilty. And so given the fact of what he did and how he has turned this girl's life upside down forever, I was very quick.
Definitely.
I had no problem making that decision.
All right. Brad Cascio, who is the Assistant District Attorney in Livingston Parish, we want to thank you for joining us here on The Factor Uncensored and sharing the details of this case since it's been adjudicated already. We appreciate your time,
He agreed to the
castration.
castration.
And welcome back to The Factor Uncensored. We continue our coverage of a rare sentencing of a convicted rapist out of Louisiana. A judge has ordered for the suspect to be castrated physically. My next guest explains the physical aftermath for a man who would no longer have his balls.
Oh.
And following up on this crazy story out of Louisiana and Livingston Parish, we have Dr. Danish Ali from Archpoint Pain Institute. Dr. Ali, Glenn Sullivan Sr. Found guilty of raping a 14-year-old, getting
and he's doing 50 years. He's already 54 years old.
Threatening her and her parents' life. If she told anyone, she stood up and decided to tell. He was convicted and sentenced to 50 years in prison, and of course, physical castration. Now, the assistant DA, Brad Cascio,
I didn't even know they can do this shit.
What chemical castration is, What in
Wow.
the hell is physical castration?
What in the hell is it?
Yeah, Isaiah. Yeah, crazy story out of Louisiana here. So, physical castration is when they physically and medically cut your testicles and close off and remove your testicles, and which are responsible for producing testosterone. As we know, testosterone is a steroid hormone that
Shit
is in
sound.
high
Oh,
amounts in men, and it helps
grab your
with
shit, fellas.
erections, and also it
This
helps
shit
also
sound
helps
painful.
with maintaining a sex drive. And so when you have that
What
removed,
the
the
hell?
idea is that
Jeez.
you are not
Shit.
producing this testosterone
Y'all hear
that
this
would
shit?
be responsible for that erection and also for that sex drive that we see in men
Sicko.
with as a responsibility or predominantly due to testosterone.
And it would essentially keep a rapist, a monster at bay when it comes to.
That's the idea. That is correct, Isaiah. And what's interesting is my understanding is that there are probably also other things where they cannot obtain testosterone pills, injections, the creams that folks talk about, and so you can't go to a physician and ask them, hey, I'd like to get my testosterone refilled or amount increased. And so I think that's probably another factor into it. But again, what we do know is with the low amount of testosterone, yes, as we mentioned, the erection, sex drive, but also there's the risk of heart disease and osteoporosis in folks that have a lower testosterone level as well. And we see lower testosterone levels be responsible for obesity. So, there are side effects to this, and I wonder if they're going to be challenging those and bringing those up if they plan on
They don't care
appealing
about
this
these side effects.
decision
They
here.
finna cut them off.
Dr. Donnie Shirley, I don't think they give a about this guy and gaining weight or anything after he is castrated for what he did to this young lady. I simply don't think they care. They just want him castrated. Now, when you think about someone who's a rapist and has sexual urges, obviously, if you get the testicles cut off, that'll help. But I would think it's also a mental thing as well. How do you deal with that? I would assume he would have to.
You think it's a
undergo
mental
counseling
thing?
or something else, because a rapist, while it's physical, it's also about mental. It's about power over someone. So how do you combat that if this guy ever gets out? He's 54, serving 50 years. He could get out, but I mean, will he likely be alive? Probably not.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's an interesting point you bring up, Isaiah. So yes, it is also physical and in the mind as well. But the idea is with the lower amount of testosterone, your mind does not have that urge and that drive. And so that's definitely one thing. In terms of counseling, probably, yeah. I mean, there is what we call cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, that can be initiated in something like this, and probably is going to be to help reframe and process these sorts of thoughts that this rapist have.
Voluntarily in intake. And if he ever were to take testosterone.
That's crazy, y'all. Wow. There you have it, people. Sullivan having his testicles removed for assaulting this 14-year-old girl time and time again, and she finally had the courage to turn his dog ass in. Got her pregnant, and she has to raise a child by this sicko, by this weirdo. He took a deal for 50 years and then had to agree to a physical castration on top of the 50 years. What do you guys think about that? Leave a comment. What do you think about them physically cutting off? Ooh, sounds great. Sounds painful. I didn't know that they can do that shit, man. Did y'all know that? Sounds crazy. I guess he has it coming, though. Sicko had it coming. Sicko. Stay free, people!